Studies Section 7, Communication and the Nature of Understanding. Introduction. In the previous lectures, we made the attempt to come to terms with the notion of understanding. We noted that since the circumference of what we seek to understand and how we seek to understand them is very broad, the concept itself becomes a notorious one to define. Defining it would imply arriving at a set of criteria which enable it to serve as an operational construct for any kind of understanding. This conclusion is further complicated to the extent that understanding also features as a critical core in the communication process. How then do we communicate in such a way that understanding will not be distorted? This lecture will be concerned with the nature of communication and its relationship with understanding. Learning outcomes for study section 7. When you have studied this study section, you should be able to define communication better, describe adequately how communication relates to the search for understanding, explain how communication constitutes a search for understanding in the human society, communication as a dialogue. Communication involves the transmission of intention or meaning from one person to another. This process is not complete until the receiver adequately understood what the sender's intention is. In this sense, we can see communication appropriately as dialogue or a conversation. What is a dialogue? Dialogue derives from the Greek dialogos, which translates as speak with each other. To assume conversation at all is to assume that meaning has been successfully transferred and understood between two or more people. In defining communication, we come across three important components. The first is that it is a process. The implication of this is that communicating is an ongoing and vibrant activity given to multiple transformations. This process could encompass, for instance, meeting your future spouse for the first time. The uncertainty that characterized that meeting is later subordinated to a free-flowing interaction that leads eventually to marriage, which is also a form of continuous interpersonal communication that lasts for life. There is a constant movement in such a communicative process from one dimension to another. The second component of defining communication is the exchange of message, verbal or non-verbal from one person to another. These messages are the vehicles of interaction. When you stand in front of a person and make no attempt to communicate any message, then you have not entered the communication art. The last component in a fruitful definition of communication is that of meaning. The second component in itself is unenlightening unless the other person can participate in your intention. Imagine standing with a Yoruba person and saying in English, "Could you please lend me your pen?" You have not communicated anything unless the person you are speaking with shares the space of meaning embedded in the English language. If she or he is not literate in English, then you have not communicated any meaning. For West and Turner, meaning is what people extract from a message. Words alone have no meaning. People attribute meaning to words. We create the meaning of a message even as the message unfolds. West and Turner, 2009-10. Literally, what is a dialogue? Dialogue is derived from a Greek word dialogos, which means speak with each other. Communication and meaning. Meaning therefore becomes a central item in communication and understanding. According to Scruton, meaning has four dimensions, which are: A. Meaning is an activity. It is what people do. In other words, meaning is an attempt at unraveling intention behind a message. B. Meaning is a relational term. It represents an attempt to communicate. That is, John means something by his gestures to Mary, 1994-51. C. Meaning is an intentional act. To mean something is to do something with a particular intention, and that intention is directed towards the other person, IBID. Fourthly, in making a particular gesture or uttering a particular sign, I intend that the other person should understand what I intend. It is this aspect of understanding the intended meaning that becomes problematic. For the task of understanding to even begin, there is an assumption that the person you are communicating with is part of your universe of meaning. Communication in this sense includes the manner and style in which messages are conveyed and imparted, always against the background of the tightly woven fabric of professional and everyday life, with its shared experiences, participative relationships, joint endeavors, and moral concerns. In what sense is meaning an activity? It is what people do. In other words, meaning is an attempt at unraveling intention behind a message. Thus, you can't assume that you have communicated with another until you are sure that what you mean is what she or he understands. The question then is, how do we ground that idea of understanding? Consider this example from the internet. A man announces his plans to clean the gutters. His wife asks what ladder he is using. He answers. She comments that it might be too slippery from the rain. He replies, no. Next, she suggests that he wait until their son comes home to help, to which he immediately replies that he is not waiting. Then he blows up at her and accuses her of criticizing him and treating him like he is stupid. She is surprised at his response, but what he wanted was to be left alone to do the task, and felt nagged by her questions. She, on the other hand, always appreciates his collaboration and opinions when she works on a project, but has trouble getting him involved. What do you think has happened between the couple? Simple. The message she sent was not the message he received. The problem of understanding. To understand the meaning intended in a conversation is to attempt to make sense of what the other is saying. To make sense of what others are saying implies attempting to place oneself within the broad space of meaning from which the sender is communicating his or her meaning. A person may say, for instance, "Thank God it's Friday." This expression may communicate different meaning to different people. For non-Muslims, for example, it may signal the end of a work week. For others, it may be something else, IBID 11. What then should understanding meaning consist in? If I say I am a bad person, what does the expression mean? And how does another person understand what the expression means? In other words, what does it mean to understand such an expression in the process of communication? Does it consist in knowing what the expression I used to mean? The challenge of communication is therefore the challenge of piecing together what the other person is saying. It involves a theory of understanding or of sense making. Such a theory enables the receiver to see clearly, without accepting the visual metaphor for understanding, what sense the conversation makes. It is only when such an understanding has been achieved that one can truly say that the meaning intended has been extracted and finally that communication has taken place. Summary for study section 7. In this study section, you have learned that 1. The 3 dimensions of communication as a process, as involving messages sent from a person to another, and as involving the retrieval of meaning encoded in the messages. 2. The dimension of communication implies that the communication art is a continuous process of sending and retrieving meaning which is meant to be understood. 3. The communication process does not even begin in an art of soliloquy in which a person is conversing with him or herself, and in a situation involving two or more people, that process begins when a message is sent with an encoded meaning and the meaning is understood by the receiver. 4. To understand what the sender intended is to fashion for oneself a theory of understanding which could see the art of understanding as that of getting an explanation, achieving a visual image of the sender's meaning, possessing a capacity, interpretation, and so on. 5. The first condition for such an understanding is that the sender and the receiver must both participate in the same space of shared meaning. This is the end of study section 7. Thanks for listening.